Thanks for joining me here today for another Conversations with Cabral, where I'm excited to announce that our special guest today is Nick Broadhurst. I've known Nick Broadhurst and Melissa Ambrosini, his wife, for about 3 years now, actually over 3 years now, and had the pleasure of getting to meet them just this past year in Australia on their home court. So it was great getting to meet them in person when we've known each other for now many, many years online. And I've had the pleasure of working with Nick on his own health, which he details here on the show, but also getting to know him as a person and the depth of his knowledge and really the depth of his experience in life made for a really interesting conversation. So I know you're going to love today's show. Let both Nick and I know what you thought about it on social media. We would love to hear from you. And now, of course, enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Nick, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on here today. I'm excited for this interview, and it's been a long time coming on my show.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here.
And one of the first things I always start with, and I think that this is especially true with you, is that you are someone that is known as a musician, a composer. You've done documentaries before. You have a health and lifestyle-based podcast. So many different talents. So when someone asks you, they bump into you on the street, they bump into you at a seminar, and they ask you, "Hey, what is it that you do?" How do you respond to that?
It's really funny. I actually still don't know how to answer that question.
A lot of polymaths do not, right? It's just kind of like, well, what's the context that we're having this conversation in?
It's so true. Look, I always say, my biggest love is music, and I am a musician and singer-songwriter, but I do lots of things. And so, it's always pretty much that answer. And, I think for me, I tend to get bored if I'm not doing lots of different things. So it's a blessing and it's a curse, I think.
Yeah. And so to be honest, when I first met you, I had no idea that you were a musician. I just didn't know that at all. I saw you as someone that spoke on lifestyle, someone that spoke on health, and of course, introduced to you too through Melissa. And then I find all these different sides to you that I never actually knew, existed. And so it's really interesting when talking with someone like yourself, there's a lot of depth. There's a lot of depth inside of, I think, every individual. And the more that you get to know them, the more conversations you're really willing to have with that person. Now, sometimes on a deeper level, you begin to understand the complexity, and not in a bad way, of an individual and really what makes them tick. So it's been a lot of fun actually getting to know you, getting to know Melissa, and actually becoming friends. So it's been a lot of fun. And so again, I appreciate you being on the show here today.
Yeah, it's great. It's sort of, bizarre being on your show because we've come a long way since we first met.
That's right. We have. We'll get into that here today as well. But before we talk about your journey, which is one of the reasons why, I did want to have you on the show, I would like to really get into, because what you do, and again, I want to talk a little bit about you as a musician first, because what you do is, I think, fairly unique, meaning I don't know that I would say that you're a pure musician, because your ability to compose music videos, and correct me if I'm wrong if someone else is doing that, is like second to none. I mean, the storytelling that you go into with the music video, and a lot of people don't know this, so they're finding out something about me now as well, is that I studied a lot of fine arts in undergrad and college. A lot of visual arts, a lot of sculpture, drawing, all of those different things, and architecture. And I love looking at, beautifully composed, believe it or not, whether it's modern dance or whatever it is. I can't sing, I can't dance, but that doesn't mean I can't appreciate it. And so when I saw your music video, I think it was Little Lover, and then you did a video called Bones, and I'm like, how is the same person doing both of these videos? And if people haven't checked it out, you have to check out those two videos. One is like out of Fight Club, and then the other one is just as, I don't know if it's contemporary or modern, but it's a beautiful performance that you put on with one other person in that video. So talk a little bit about that. Like, would you consider yourself more a musician who then got into video and filmmaking, or vice versa?
Yeah, I think definitely musician first and foremost. I think that the visual storytelling for me is like, I'm always interested in what can I do to help display the feeling of the music even more. For me, it's all about the music. But at the same time, I think that the visual medium is really interesting because different people connect with different things in different ways. And some people just love to sit down with headphones on, close their eyes and listen, but some people are very visual. And so with something like Little Lover, and interestingly enough, Little Lover was my very first solo single. And maybe I'll take you back in a minute to where this all sort of started, but it was my first single, and I had a very clear picture of what I wanted to create with that music video. And very quickly, I brought a director on board to help me pull it off because it was technically very challenging to do. And all of a sudden we had 2 huge lots at Fox Studios. We were building dams. It turned into this gargantuous thing, which independent artists just don't do because it's financially impossible, right? But being my first single, I thought, let's just do it. Let's just go all out. And I'm really glad I did because I feel like that song and that music video is a classic piece of art. And what I love about art is once you've created it, especially music, like it's out there forever. It's such an interesting thing when you create something from literally with music, you're creating things from vibrations, from air. It's invisible. And all of a sudden it exists, and I think that's just such an interesting thing. I remember really clearly the moment I wrote Little Lover. This was before I met Melissa. And I was, in some respects, kind of fantasizing of what it would be like to have a life with a soulmate, because I'd come from, and we'll speak about this, but I'd come from a fairly tumultuous relationship and divorce. And when I wrote that, it was the first time I actually wrote something on my own where I thought, I'm going to release that. It was the first song I've been writing for years and years and years. And when I wrote, I literally put my hands on the keyboard. And when I hit those first 2 notes, 2 very simple notes, but they're so powerful, those 2 notes, just C and E. When I hit those notes, something shifted in me like, I'm here, I've arrived. This is it. This is the song. So yeah, I'm really glad that you actually enjoy the visual stuff because as an artist, you don't even really know if people are really noticing what you're doing. Like you get views, you get these comments, but it never really feels real, when it's online.
Well, one part to that too is that, well, first and foremost, that they'll let people know that you also perform in your videos. I don't know if it's all your videos, but I know at least a bunch that I've seen, you're acting in that as well. And that is dance. And there's a lot that goes into it. And Little Lover it's an art piece. There's no doubt about it. I mean, that is performance art. That is what I think syncs up the words really well with what's then actually being displayed. And music videos, I mean, they're lost now. I mean, they're not really out there anymore since music videos are expensive to produce. A lot of time the people don't see the return on it, or it's with not music that you would want to watch necessarily a video with, right? It's not the performance that you're creating. It's just to get likes or shares or whatever it might be. What you're doing is truly a performance and truly art. So I wanted to put that out there for people. If for someone that's gotten away from music videos like myself to be able to see what you're producing, it's really high quality. I mean, it honestly is. This is great quality work out there. And it's nice to hear that too. And again, for people who don't know, and we're referring to Melissa as everyone should know, and they should, but it's your wife is Melissa Ambrosini. And so many people have heard Melissa on my show, and we've talked about health. We've talked about relationships. We've talked about vegan-based lifestyles. We've talked about pregnancy, all of those different things. and you're basically two halves that really do complete each other. And it's really nice to be able to see the relationship that you both have. And for people that don't know too, for the very first time last March, before this whole pandemic really hit, we were able to visit the both of you in Australia. And it was an amazing time, with you. Brought together some friends. We had a picnic outside, all the natural health things people would think that natural health people would do. Our kids were out playing on their own. We weren't even watching them. It was near the beach. I mean, it was really, really quite nice. So not to derail us from our topic at hand here, but I would love to hear some of the inspiration for this music. And were you a musician even in childhood? I mean, did you learn to play musical instruments growing up? What did that look like?
So for me as a kid, it was undeniable I was going to be a musician. And I remember my earliest memories, if I go back to about 8 years old, I used to get my red Sony cassette player and I would sneak it underneath my sheets, my bed sheets at night, and I would listen to 1930s, 1940s jazz. I mean, what 8-year-old does that,
It's true.
And I became obsessed with jazz and old big band music like Glenn Miller and Charlie Parker. And I've written a blog post, actually a podcast as well, about a past life experience I had, which is crazy. I never sought that out. And this weird thing happened to me a long time ago, which sort of connected me back to that era. Whether or not it's true, who knows, but it felt interesting anyway. And, when I go back to as a kid, I remember, and still now, I literally move through the world in a way where I'm always doing something musical. So if we're watching TV, I'm playing saxophone on my toes, or I'm playing a drum beat with my teeth in my head. It's really weird. Like it's there all the time. It's really hard to switch it off. And it was there from a very young age. And the first instrument I was given was flute. So at school, they kind of, they trial you on a recorder, and then they'll see what instrument they're going to give you. And they gave me flute, and I was a bit disappointed with that. I played it for 2 years, and I got to this point where I just knew this wasn't the coolest instrument for a guy to do. And I was only like 10 years old. I'd already had my first girlfriend at like 9 years old. I was a very early bloomer. We didn't do anything. I think we may have held hands, maybe. But I remember there was this interesting moment where I was I'd sort of progressed to the senior band. I was very young, but I got to the senior band level. And I thought, you know what? If I close my eyes and play this song in the band all the way through with my eyes closed, the conductor's going to notice and he's going to have a conversation and see what was going on. So I decided to close my eyes. I played this song without looking at any music. And at the end of the song, he sort of just looked at me and he clocked it and didn't say anything and pulled me aside at the end of the rehearsal. Said, "Nick, what were you doing with your eyes closed there?" I said, "I was trying to show you that I've got this flute thing down and I want to move on, And he said, "Well, what do you want to do?" I said, I want to play sax. And so, I listened to Charlie Parker growing up. If you guys don't know who Charlie Parker is, he's just, a jazz legend, known as the Bird. And I just wanted to be able to do what he did. And so they allowed me to play sax. I got my first saxophone. It was the greatest thing that ever happened to me for my parents to buy me a saxophone. You can see in the background, there's my saxophone on the wall. That saxophone there has done a lot, that saxophone. I'll tell you about the original? What's done in it. That is not the original, no. That's a tenor saxophone. I started on alto, but so basically I started playing saxophone and it was like life just made sense for me. I had this way of communicating and I became kind of obsessed, but I didn't learn it the traditional way. I had a few lessons, but I actually started learning purely from ear and just improvising. So I'd sit in my bedroom at a very young age, 11 or 12, and I'd have, jazz and blues backup CDs playing and I'd just be soloing to them. So I developed this really good ear. And so when I was going through school, whenever an opportunity came up to be the soloist, I was, always the guy putting my hand up. And my nickname became Solo because I took all the solos. And, that's really, I just knew I was going to be a musician. And so I went to study saxophone at the Conservatorium in Sydney, and I did the first few classes, and I just thought, it's not for me, because there was this level of discipline that I didn't enjoy. I enjoyed just being really free with my music. So
what did the discipline require you to have to do that just wasn't within your wheelhouse or not your interest?
I think it was the technical side of it, you know. And I never got excited about music because of its technicalities. I got excited because of the feeling. And all of a sudden we were analyzing the tiniest of things, and, you know, how technically was I, if I was technically a good player or not. And I would say I'm not technically a good player. I'm a player of feeling, you know. And I think in some ways they're the best. Like Charlie Parker was technically brilliant, but he was emotional the way he played his saxophone. So I decided to not pursue that anymore. I went and studied industrial chemistry in university. I lasted one semester. I realized that, okay, I might have been good at science at school, but this is not for me. And ended up traveling around the world, as almost all Australian kids do. And when I came back, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I was working sort of odd jobs. And I started dating this girl who was an actress, and she was sort of mixed in with the cool crew in Sydney, you know. And it turned out she went to school with this girl called Sarah Jane, who just happened to be the founder of this really big fashion label at the time called Sass & Bide in Australia. Very iconic label. And we went out to dinner, and she introduced me to her boyfriend, whose name was Damon, also known as MC Double D. And Damon said, hey, you know, we've just started this night down in Bondi called Sneaky Sundays. You should come and jam with us. So I did. I went and jammed at this tiny venue. There was maybe room for 80 people. We had maybe 120 people in there. It was sweat dripping off it was just so intense, this little club. And Sneaky Sundays quickly grew and grew and grew. We used to have 500 people lined up outside the street trying to get in, and now we'd be picking celebrities and the hottest women, and, you know, it was just like that scene, you know. And it started building 4 guys who really didn't know what we were doing that much. We had 2 guys who were pretty new to DJing, 1 guy who was pretty new to MCing. I was new to sort of soloing over house music, and it grew and grew, and it basically became the biggest band in Australia at the time. And we had a #1 album, multiple ARIA awards, and I was there for 7 years. And, you know, it became this really big thing, this moment in time. And it's still actually going. The 2 of the people are still going in the band. But I was never really, it wasn't my thing. You know, I was the baby of the group. I was managed. And as it got bigger and bigger, I was part of a big machine. And I never felt like I was truly contributing much other than being out the front and whipping up the crowd, you know. So when my son Leo was born, I decided to phase it out slowly. And I phased it out and really had to think seriously about what I was going to do with my life. And I had recently been married. I had this little baby boy. I had responsibilities. And I decided to get what you would call a real job, you know. And I went into real estate. And, you know, going from literally touring the world, playing at, you know, we supported bands like Jamiroquai and Robbie Williams and had sold out venues of 10, 20,000 people. It was intense time. And I went from that to cold calling people, basically trying to whip up a career. So the shift was huge. And part of me was excited not to have to be out late every single night, breathing in smoke. Because, you know, that was one thing I did. I was playing in the smokiest of environments, playing saxophone 4 or 5 nights a week. And I was kind of relieved. And I went from nothing, knowing no one, to building a really big career in real estate. I was awarded the top agent in the country in 2009. And I had an average sale price of around $7 million. So I built this career, but it came at a huge cost. And the cost was I had to push extremely hard to build that career. And Stephen, as your audience would know a lot about Ayurveda, I am a Vata Pitta. So my Pitta was in full, overgear, right? My Vata was essentially kind of squashed. That creative side of me was squashed. And my Vata took over. And I just ignored all the warning signs. And I remember 2009, I was in a really rough patch with my marriage at the time and quite unhappy. I was watching TV one night and I started getting this headache. It had been there for maybe 3 days and I never get headaches. I don't take painkillers, those sorts of things, but I was popping painkillers left, right and center because I was in so much pain. And I remember getting off the couch and I had what looked like the perfect life. I had the fancy house and the cars and, it all looked good from the outside. Everyone thought I was happy and successful. But inside I was literally imploding. I was so unhappy. And I called my parents at about 10 o'clock at night. I said, Mum, something's not right. Something's really wrong here. And she's like, what do you mean? I said, I feel like I'm going to die. And she said, okay, well, I'll leave my phone on and just call me if things get worse. By the time it got to midnight, I literally felt like this was it. Like I'm on the way out. I had such intense pain in my body and in my head that it was unbearable. And so I rolled out of bed, got myself a taxi because my son was only 2 at the time, I think, and he had really bad asthma. I didn't want to wake him up. And I got myself to hospital. It was the worst car ride of my life. Everything hurt. And I waited in the ER for 2 hours. They thought I was a junkie because I was dressed in sort of Ugg boots and Adidas pants and I was shaking like a leaf. And they thought I was a junkie because the hospital was located in a part of Sydney where there was a high concentration of addicts. And then I woke up maybe 6 or 7 hours later. I'd passed out and I was in intensive care. And it turned out, they said to me, when I opened my eyes, I couldn't believe the pain I was in. They'd knocked me out with all sorts of stuff. And this doctor knelt down, took these earplugs out of my ears. I had things over my eyes. They were trying to, dampen my senses. And they whispered, Nick, we think you've had a brain aneurysm. And I said, is this serious? And they said, yeah, it's really serious. This is life-threatening. So that's what I woke up to in intensive care. But it turned out it was viral meningitis. And I think your audience will find this interesting because I had just recently before that exposed myself to a huge amount of toxic mold during the renovation. So I was stressed. My immune system was completely shot from this mold exposure. I was pushing hard. I was completely imbalanced. And this virus, whether it was Epstein-Barr, who knows, it just completely took over my entire existence. So that was my...
Wow.
That was my journey to my downfall. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's unbelievable, except that, and unfortunate, this is sometimes what it takes for that reawakening, right? It's for how do we get out of that? Because I don't know if this is true or not, but and I don't know what happens next specifically in your story, but I'm assuming this allows then for a new transformation for you to take. Because I didn't even know that you were, the level of success that you had in real estate. And that's within a short period of time as well. Going from, and I saw that actually on your bio, I think it said like sneaky sound system or something like that. And I was like, what is that? First of all, I don't know that much about music. And second is obviously I'm not from Australia. But of course it's global as well. But I had no idea about the success in real estate as well. And that's interesting to me because my wife is in real estate and has been for quite some time. And I just know the hours that it takes. I mean, to be a good real estate agent, you're working before work and after other people's work, and you're working on the weekend. So you're basically working all day and the weekends when people want to go see houses. So it is an unbelievable amount of work and really just trying to make people happy all the time. The sellers, the buyers, the mortgage brokers, all of those different people. So it's impressive. But besides, and I want to get to the health part, what I see is someone who is not afraid though to reinvent themselves. You know, you went from feeling who you were as a teenager or so to being like, no, this is not my path, to then being a world-renowned musician, to then saying, no, I'm going to leave that behind and I'm going to do real estate. And I don't know exactly what comes next, but where does the confidence in yourself, or is it just like, hey, I've just got to go for broke? What is it that allows you to say, I'm just going to shift gears here. I was going right. Now I'm just going to take a left.
I think that's changed over the years because if you look at, say, real estate, well, let's go back one step. Sneaky sound system. I fell into that. I mean, I worked hard and it was a lot of work, but I sort of fell into that and went along for this ride. You know, it was a wild, wild ride. I could tell you a gazillion stories. There was some pretty amazing things. And I'm really grateful for that time, grateful to the guys at that time because I learned a lot about myself and what I did and didn't want in my life. Interesting because that whole scene as well, you know, music is really wrapped up in drugs and alcohol. And it was everywhere, you know, everywhere was getting offered to me. And my nickname was Mr. San Pellegrino because I just drank sparkling water because I just wasn't interested in that, you know. And I knew if I was breathing in smoke every night, I had to really take care of myself. But when it came to, say, real estate, it came out of pure desperation. I had a family. I had to find a way to support them. And so the push and the drive really was, if I don't do this, I mean, what do we do? Are we on the street? What happens? You know, I knew I had a supportive family if I ever needed to fall back on that. And I actually lent on my parents a lot more than I wanted to through that period financially. I had to ask for loans and to just get through things because I was living a pretend life. I was making things look shiny and perfect, but you know, I was running up debt and just living in such an imbalanced way. So I literally created this scenario for myself where I had to succeed. I just had to, you know, and with that came some things, I wouldn't say they're regrets, but things that I've learned a lot from, such as on the weekends, being with Leo, but not really being with him, not being present, you know, having a 2 or 3 year old trying to get your attention and you're there physically, but your head is somewhere else, negotiating a deal on the phone or something. So it was a really tough time. So I think that was desperation, right? But then when you have a really big low in your life where you're really faced with your mortality, like I was, you start lining up your priorities a lot more, right? And it wasn't immediate for me. I resisted music for quite a long time. And I started, I was essentially bedridden for like 3 years. Okay, so I had this time where I could learn. So I started learning about internet marketing. And I started
So this is directly after you got out of the hospital? Or was it right after that?
I had about 1 more year in real estate where I said to my employers, look, I need to work from home. I worked from home for a year. I had my biggest year ever actually working from home and doing a lot less sales. I was just really picky what I worked on and I just worked on really big things. And then got to the end of 2010 and I just said to them, I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore.
And so then you just give it all up?
Just gave it all up. But I was really fortunate. I had income protection insurance. And I didn't even think of using it. Didn't even think of it. And out of the blue, my insurer rang me. Hey, Nick, how you doing? And I said, oh, not doing so well, actually. I'm really unwell. And they said, why haven't you made a claim? I'm like, oh, don't know. And so what that allowed me was they essentially replaced about half of my income for about 3 years, which was an absolute godsend for me. It allowed me to invest in my health and to start pursuing other things. And I should have gone into music, but I went into more internet marketing. I was resisting. I had so much fear about doing my own music. And I went through a relationship for 3.5 years after my marriage, which was very, very supportive, a fantastic relationship. That came to a natural end. I actually had the wedding ring. I was going to propose. Like life could have gone in so many different directions, right? And I then went from that to slowly having this part of me waking up going, what are you doing? You know what you want to do with your life. Stop doing everything else, this whole polymath thing. Just do the one thing that you're, born to do. And so I thought, okay, look, I'm a sax player. What am I going to do? So instead I bought myself a piano and a good microphone. And I just started playing piano and singing. Didn't know how to play piano, but I just started playing it, started singing. The minute I had that combination, it was like, oh, okay, now I'm really finding my voice, literally finding my voice, going from not singing to singing. And it was really weird when that first song came out to have people hearing me sing, because no one knew me as a singer, right? And it's still weird for me to be a singer. Like even 2 weeks ago, I recorded a song called Throne, which comes out in about 2 singles from now. And it's this piano ballad, which requires me to really, there's nowhere to hide in this song. I still don't think of myself as a singer, but I clearly am, But
how did you learn to sing? Did you just naturally have that talent, or did you take lessons? Because I know that you grew up playing instruments, but that does not mean that you can sing by any means.
I think I just had my inspirations of people who I looked up to. Like one of my main influences was Tom York from Radiohead. I loved the way he performed. He used a lot of falsetto, which is the high voice. And I just started experimenting. And I did take on a teacher for a short period of time to help with some technical things, which helped. And recently I actually brought on a vocal technician because I noticed the last sort of 12 months my voice was not the way it used to be. And I was like, there's something technically quite not right here. And she works with Sia and Sam Smith and like the biggest artists in the world. So I thought, okay, well, she knows what she's doing. And she's really helped me a lot in the last sort of 4 months, which has been great going into all these new singles I'm releasing. But so to answer your question, there came a point where the transformation came through desperation, and then it's more out of inspiration now, and knowing that if I didn't do this thing that's inside of me, there was no greater price to pay than not doing it. Like it was the worst possible outcome was not doing my music. It was such a strong desire and pull for me.
It's one of those things where we say that you have to think about all of the things that keep popping up in your life. It's basically that sign that if you didn't do this thing, you would regret it when you look back 5 years from now, 10 years ago, whatever it might be. Those are the things that we absolutely must do. Sometimes we spend our time doing things that we think we should do, but we wouldn't necessarily regret not doing them. And so I think it's really interesting that for you, no matter what, music has just followed you through life. And I want to stay on the topic for just one more moment. And there's a reason why I asked this question. But when you worked with that vocal technician, what was it that they found that was, because I'm sure it was just details, what was it that was off?
It was the way I was engaging my neck muscles when I was going between chest voice and head voice. So, women don't have a chest and a head. They've got one, essentially not a range, but they don't have to move. So we have Adam's apples, right? So we, as men, can go from here to here. And they're two very different ways of engaging your
You
vocal
can, but
cords.
I can't, but yes.
Well, it's,
I'd have to be taught somehow, yes. Well, and the reason why I asked that question is that there is always an answer. Like, I really believe that. It's finding a coach, it's finding a mentor, a doctor, whatever it is in your profession, because somebody has the answer. And that's why I asked you that question, because I just know that someone at her level who's worked with 5,000, 10,000, however many people, she's done her 20,000 hours as an expert, she's going to know. And she's going to know what your blind spots are and help you get there with just the fine tuning, And so that's why I love being able to hear that. I love being able to find just those tiny details.
Yeah, what's interesting about you saying that is that there's a parallel, and maybe this is a good segue, but there's a parallel between her and you now that I reflect back on it. So here I am thinking, okay, I'm a crap singer, my voice is shot, And when we had our first session, she ran me through some exercise. She said, Nick, don't worry, you're an easy one, right? I've got you sorted, don't worry about it. And that just gave me this confidence like, cool. And I built this thing up in my mind that, something was really off. because you hear about singers getting nodules and having operations and this sort of stuff, you hear about it all the time. And I thought maybe I'd put myself there over the years of using my voice incorrectly. And maybe I would have ended up there without her, possibly. But the parallel to you, Stephen, is that the interesting thing is in the intro, you said that you met me through Melissa, and you didn't actually. You met me through me. So the story of how we met is I'd gone through this really sort of bizarre period in my health where I'd recovered, and then being this, I don't know whether it's my constitution or what it is, but I always like to experiment with stuff. And so I experimented with the keto diet. Now, for a Vata Pitta to just eliminate carbohydrates basically from their diet, thinking, oh, well, all the science is out there, and I'd read all these books, and I really felt like I was doing something that was for my longevity. But as you know, Stephen, when you met me, I was in a very, very different place. And maybe you can reflect on what that was when you met me, what it was like for you to meet me. But the parallel is when I met you, I was so desperate. I was so lost, but you looked me in the eyes, and this is the first time we met, and you said to me, I know exactly what to do with you. Don't worry, you'll be fine. And having someone say that, you were the very first practitioner I'd ever met where I felt like this person truly sees me. It was the very first time that I'd ever had that experience, and not like I was a problem to be solved or something that was broken. No one likes to feel broken. If you're making a film, which is another topic, but if you're making a film or a documentary, you don't want to make people feel broken. There's this broke fix sort of thing in film, and a lot of it's unfortunate. I feel like a lot of practitioners can, without really knowing, make you feel a bit broken. And when I met you, having someone just look you in the eyes and say, I've got you, you'll be fine, I know exactly what to do, was the moment where I think I had complete buy-in with you and your process. But what was it like for you, Steve, when you met me? How are things different?
I clearly remember that. I remember our first conversation. And for me, when you say that, it's still like I get emotional. It's weird that I get emotional and you're the one going through the process. But people don't really understand. I, as a natural health doctor, go through the process with people because I lived it. So it takes me back to my worst days. But it's also what allows me to empathize with people, whether I'm designing a protocol. I understand what they're going through. And so for me, hearing your words and seeing you, I can see it in someone's eyes. I know where they're at. And it totally overcomes me. And that's why I can't work with as many people as I used to, because it's very emotional for me. So I do better creating protocols and overseeing thousands and thousands of labs a month, because it takes everything that I am and everything that I have. Because when I heard you in that moment, I knew everything that you had to do. But it is so overwhelming for what that you need to do in order to get well. And so I basically just said, I know how to help you. It's going to take some time. I didn't say that to you because you can't tell people that in their first appointment. You need to allow them to just say, we're going to get you through this. Now, I didn't tell you until our third appointment or fourth appointment that we're looking for you to get 10% better per month. That came later, and I'll let you kind of go through that, and you can share as much as you feel comfortable. But I just knew from someone that suffered from Addison's disease and myalgic encephalitis or encephalomyelitis, depending on how you like to say it, that I knew the journey you had ahead for you, and I knew how difficult it was. And I didn't envy the position that you were in, but I knew how to help you get through it.
Yeah, I was in a real tough spot at that time in my life. I literally had gone from, honestly, pretty good health. I was in a good place at the beginning of 2017. I think it was. I was in a pretty good place, and then I started experimenting with this keto diet, and all of a sudden, first time in my life, despite the challenges I'd been through with divorce and different things, first time in my life, I was depressed, really depressed. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, my gosh, is this my reality? Is this you, Nick? Like, you just look in the mirror and think, you know, I used to sometimes be the witness or the observer looking almost at myself thinking, really? Is this it? Is this the best you can do? You know? And I feel for people who are depressed. I lost a friend not so long ago to depression who committed suicide. And I understand how tricky a thing it is, right? So for me, I'm so grateful that it was a relatively brief period. It was essentially 12 months of my life. But I was really depressed. I was really underweight. We lived in Bondi at the time. I could not walk the length of Bondi. Okay, we're talking a mile. I couldn't get home. I didn't have the energy, right? I mean, you can explain what was happening, but I know that mitochondrially I was completely shot. My nervous system was completely wrecked. And it was a really scary place to be, really scary place. But not only that, it was really hard for my family. My wife, Melissa, we did a tour together in 2018 and we did like a real life musical. And we were both on stage and we shared part of this journey and our challenges, how, you know, Melissa would spend some nights on the couch because I was so unbearable to be around. And she really didn't know how we were going to get through it. It was really, really scary. And when you have met your soulmate, it's a big thing to have you questioning your relationship that much. And, you know, I was seeking all the time different help from different people and no one sort of got me. And then the way I met you, Stephen, was, I don't know if you remember, but I had just sort of first started hearing about CBD oil back then. And I literally thought, I'm going to search for some podcasts, and you popped up. And I listened to this CBD podcast back in, I mean, you were probably on episode 200 or 300 at the time. And I heard you speaking about Ayurveda, and I'd been deep into Ayurveda for many, many years. I practice Vedic meditation. It's a big part of my life, the whole Vedic philosophy. And I was like, wow, this guy's super interesting. He's functional medicine practitioner, naturopath, Ayurvedic practitioner, Chinese. Who is this guy, you know? And I just started working with another functional medicine practitioner who was more paleo-based. And I had my first session with him. And I don't know if you remember, Stephen, but I booked in with you and I kind of broke up with my other physician. I was like, I'm sorry, but I've met someone else, you know? And I had to wait a little while to get our first meeting, I think maybe 6 weeks or so. And in that time, I had all the labs done. And it was just, I don't know, sometimes there are moments in your life that you know that you're on the right path. And I knew with you that something had shifted and clicked. And I felt so comfortable in our first meeting. It was a real game changer for me.
Oh, that's great to hear. I mean, because I almost never get to speak with someone about their experience on the other side. It's simply, you know, me asking, me seeing what's going on, adjusting as needed. And that's a big part of what you and I did. I mean, a big part of what you and I did was, and anybody suffering. So if anybody doesn't truly understand what ME is, myalgic encephalitis, and there was more going on than just that. There was gut-based issues. There are other factors. But think about having flu-like symptoms. Like think not a cold, but think about the flu when your legs just feel like, you know, 100 pounds, 200 pounds each, and you're just sore all over your body. You're in a bad mood. You're not hungry, but you're losing weight, and you're in the worst possible spot. Then think about waking up to that every single day of your life. That's what it's like with ME. And so if anybody you know is suffering from a debilitating, you know, dis-ease of the body, they're not fun to be around, but they're not fun to be around for a specific reason. They feel terrible and it's affecting their entire life. And so, you know, the best thing that you can do is you try to empathize and you just try to get them help, because it's not going to get better on its own. Like there's no way that Nick was going to get better on its own. Like he wasn't going to get better. And we had to rebuild his body from the ground up. And you know, all the credit goes to you. I provide protocols for people based on them, based on their unique bioindividuality. And I make adjustments based on what I see for the person. But you and I spoke once a month. So it's 168 hours in a week. That's 600 plus hours in a month. I'm with you for 1 hour. And so when people get well, I say, listen, I can provide you with a book, a blueprint, but you're doing it. You're making it happen. And for whatever reason, you persevered, because there was ups and downs, and there's always going to be. So for the worst autoimmune issues, for the worst diseases of the body, mental health as well, there are bad times, and you went through some bad times. You couldn't eat the food that I wanted you to eat, and we had to make adjustments there. You questioned a lot of what I recommend for you, and that's okay. And I told you why. I explained why. And some of it you did, some of you didn't do. We made adjustments, and I remember many, many calls, and I said, Nick, I know what you need to do, but I understand necessarily why you don't think that you should be doing it. And because I work with a lot of very intelligent people, and sometimes it's nice though to have that guide who's already at the end of the path, and they're literally just kind of shining the light and kind of pulling you along, but it's still your journey. You still had to walk it yourself. And the nice thing is this, I don't know if it's a nice thing or not, and we can get to it if you want, but you push yourself to a level that most people don't. You allow that pitta to consume you at times, and you do things that, and I do the same. So it takes one to know one, that are above and beyond what your body is like capable of, even though your mind is. And so you will in the future always teeter back to where you were before. But the goal is to catch yourself now before that, and to say, okay, now I need to do everything to balance it out. Because I'm a big proponent of working hard. And especially when you love your work, that's why it's hard for me. I love my work. You love your work. But I think sometimes the both of us can go overboard. And so we both have to catch ourselves. And so walk us through a little bit of that process of maybe some of the ups and downs and everything you learned along. I mean, not necessarily just the ups and downs, but what did you learn from your own struggle, from your own journey that you could possibly share as well?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think it's easy for people to listen to someone else's journey and think, oh, well, that's just not my journey. And, their journey's more shiny than mine. There's nothing shiny about my journey. It was tough. Like, it was really tough. I mean, you wanted me to eat a certain amount of starches, for example. I couldn't even, I felt so awful eating sweet potato when I first started, because my body just forgotten how to use, glucose and starches. It just had no idea what to do with them. And my gut was so destroyed from this high fat diet that I just wasn't absorbing any nutrients. So, I felt awful when I first started. I would say, Steve, in the first 3 months where I felt crap, didn't I? Like, it required a lot of belief, because in some respects I felt worse. But, and I think this is the key thing, when you are doing any sort of protocol, providing it's a good protocol, that's always a bonus. But if you're doing any sort of healing regime, the biggest thing I found is that you've got to have belief. Like, you've got to have really strong belief that what you're doing is going to work. And it's really interesting because a friend of mine recently, he's a Canadian, and he ended up in Australia. He'll probably hear this episode, actually, because I've put him onto you. And he ended up getting Ross River disease in Australia from mosquitoes, and it really messed him up. And he's been he was asking me advice. He knows my journey. He was asking me this advice, and he'd seen that I was able to. He knows I've come a long way over the last few years. And he trusted me to just help him a bit. And I put him onto your work, and he really went into your book and your podcasts. He really wanted to work with you. He couldn't get in to see you. So I said, look, I'll help you. I know the path, and I don't know exactly what's going on. I'm not a practitioner, but I will tell you that because I know his gut was completely shot. I said, let's just start with ground zero. Let's just get your gut worked out, right? And for me, that's always the biggest thing now when I hear people who are struggling. It's like, let's just get your gut worked out. And so I always put them onto, the CBO and sensitive gut guide and the things that you do, Stephen, because I know that for me, it was kind of like ground zero. If you don't get that sorted out, you're you're just not going to get very far.
And you had done, just to add a little color to that, you had done many cleanses the 3 to 6 months before I had met you. So we were, a lot of people think cleansing is good. Cleansing is good until it's bad. You can overdo all of these things. It's like you can overdo coffee enemas, you can overdo cleanses. And what happens is you create actually an imbalance just there. And part of it, like, your stomach and intestines were actually not used to being able to digest that much food. And that takes time. Like the body you don't plant the seed and you don't get the flower the next day, right? And so it's like and I just want to mention, because you said about belief. It's the last S in the de-stress protocol for a reason. You have to believe. You can't have 1 foot in and 1 foot out. And that is the one thing I can say, is that even when you weren't making the progress that we wanted you to, I believed, you believed, and it led you then to be able to put in the work on a day in and day out basis. So I want to commend you for that, because there's nothing I can really do for a person on their end to get them to believe.
And it's hard to believe when you're in the depths of it and you're depressed. But the story with my friend has the parallel there, because I could see him teetering between going down this path and fully believing it. And he totally connected with your work and understood it, because he's also a Vedic meditator and he understands Ayurveda. But then having all these other voices telling him, you got to do this, you got to have high dose spirulina, and you got to do this, And I said to him, look, choose the path you want to choose, but just choose a path and do it, really do it. So I've seen him going back and forth in this sort of, but what about this and what about that? I said, just stay here, just stay with me. He's about 2 months into CBO, completely changed him, right?
Oh, that's amazing.
Totally changed him. And of course, he's got the virus stuff to deal with, but ground zero.
No, and I really want to pull that point out. Pick a practitioner, pick a program, a coach, and see that through for 12 to 16 weeks. You have to do it. Like, you owe it to the practitioner, to yourself, and that program to see it through. There's a lot of people in the CBO protocol, they feel worse as theirs die off. There's not a lot, but it can happen. It depends on how bad you are. Remember, if you're really bad off, well, you're really bad off, and you're sensitive to everything. Like, that's the thing. You were sensitive to a lot of herbs. You were sensitive to a lot of products, just like I was. And I'm like, well, that's why I'm very fortunate to have been the worst patient when I was sick, because nothing worked. I was sensitive to everything. I couldn't take probiotics until about 9 years ago. My body was not even able to take on a lot of these substances without massive histamine-based issues. And then I, again, course correct. And so that's why, again, just like you mentioned, stick with one plan. And because if you're listening to two different people, it doesn't mean one is wrong and one is right, but it does mean that you need to follow one path for right now. And as you'll probably explain, there's no silver bullet. We didn't do one thing, but the best place to start, as you just said, is your gut and stress. I always tell people, if I can only work 100%. On two things, gut and stress, because they work with each other, right? That mind, that gut-brain based axis.
I think, again, what you were saying before about, my journey and what's it like now. And my biggest lesson is, as you said, having this Vata Pitta side of me where I have this creativity, but then a very strong Pitta as well. Because people often think I'm Vata, very Vata because of my creativity, but I'm very Pitta as well, I've got quite a big chest, for example, which is not a Vata thing, it's a Pitta thing. I've got Pitta digestion more than I have Vata digestion, So I've got this really interesting balance. And of course, my challenge is balance, because the Pitta loves to push. And when I start feeling good, I'm like, cool, let's go, And great example of this, because we had a session just last week, actually. My biggest thing is that you're right. I have a limit that I can go to, and I overstepped that recently. And it was, a good lesson to learn. In a nutshell, what happened was beginning of last year, I woke up one morning and literally just was repulsed by animal products. All of a sudden, I just couldn't do them. I'm like, oh, okay. Looks like I'm going plant-based, because my body was just like rejecting them. And I'd heard that's a common thing from a lot of friends who are on I guess, I don't want to sound all mighty here, but, a sort of spiritual path. It's this thing that happens occasionally, right? I'd heard about it, didn't believe it because I thought, I'm Vata, I need the protein, blah, blah, blah. So I had that sort of belief system. But I went plant-based and I thought, okay, I'm going to prove to myself that being plant-based, I can get even stronger and even better. And I will admit, I was shocked at my endurance, my recovery. It did actually change a lot for me. If you've seen the Game Changers, you'll see the sort of science behind the recovery and why that's the case. But because I felt so good, I pushed even harder, right? So give me an inch, I'll take a mile, right? So I started working out even more. And as you know, Stephen, I pushed and pushed, and I was pretty bulky for a Vata Pitta. Like I was, I looked great and I felt really good. And it lasted about 7 or 8 months. And then I had something happen in my gut, maybe an infection. I don't know what it was, but it just knocked me out for about a month. And I was starting to sort of move away from some of the Cabral stuff and experimenting again with little things. And I just pushed myself back down, not to where I was. Let's be clear, nowhere near where I was. But I definitely took too much out of the bank, too many deposits out of the bank, as you would say, Stephen, like you got to put deposits in, right? So I'd put deposits in for a long time and I built up a really good balance, but then I just took too many out. So right now my challenge is putting back those deposits that I took out. And for me, it manifests really quickly and I can catch it super fast now. If I've gone too hard, I will start feeling those flu-like symptoms. All right? I could easily think it's COVID or something else, but I know what it is. It's really easy for me to identify. It's sort of more of my upper body. It feels a bit kind of the achiness, and I can catch it very quickly. And I know I've got a few months to just put the deposits back, but I know what to do, so I have no fear. I know that it was totally me. I'm totally responsible for it, and you were a great reminder last week that, Nick, you're on the right path, but just, watch yourself. Don't push too hard. And that's one of my things I have to learn in life is just to chill out and just not push.
Well, that is a big part of, we've been working together now with your health for a few years now, about 3 years, I would say.
Over 2 years. Yeah.
And so now from now at this point, it's me reminding you about what you already know. And maybe, just a couple details and fine tuning from my position. And that's why people do still need an outside perspective from themselves, because I'm basically just trying to show you as that third person outside what you may not be seeing again in those blind spots. And for you, it's always going to be, because you were on that anabolic bodybuilding based program and you were doing great. But at the same time, and you didn't mention, you were also ramping up your work, right? So you've got work all in, you've got these hour workouts all in, you're eating more than ever, which consumes energy. And so like everything is going well, but what we have to look at is if, like, let's say we take, or we're changing our exercise and we were ramping that up, great. But at the same time, then we can't get less sleep and we can't ramp up our work. So this is especially true for that Vata in all of us, because we live in a Western-based world, is that it's just like you said, it's adding deposits back. So if you give out more, what are you doing to take energy in? It can be sleep, yes. Meditation's another one. Massage, foam rolling, breath work. It's going back to, and again, I learned this from martial arts. There's the hard martial arts, the external, and then there's the soft or internal. And as we get older, we don't have to stop the external, but we need to balance it more with the internal. Tai Chi with a jujitsu or a Kempo, like those. And so a lot of what I try to balance high achievers. Like that's the thing, is like, you're always going to go hard, which is great. I mean, that allows you to create amazing things for the entire world. But now it's like, okay, well, and this is, I remember when you and Melissa were going on tour and I said, what's the minimum that we can do for exercise and changes to your diet, and how much sleep can you get while then being on tour, because you're sleeping in different hotels, you're traveling, there's a lot going on. And so these are lessons that people can take from this. And the bigger thing and the biggest thing, which I love that you mentioned, is that, but now you don't have a fear of going back. And I say that all the time. I still get a cold 2-3 times a year. I still get sick, but it lasts for 3 days now. And I have no fear when I feel that you have your telltale, well, I have mine. It's like legs get a little bit heavier, dryness in the back of my throat because I've had my adenoids taken out, my tonsils taken out, I've had bones moved in my nose, and it's my first area. And I say, oh, it's coming, but I now know what to do. And I don't have that fear. And it's like, it's the best thing that I've ever been given is that, everything in life seems so much easier now because I've already gone through what I need to go through. But now I also have the realization that, and same with you, hey, if I can figure this out, I think I can figure out anything. I mean, I really can. I don't have all the answers, but I'll figure it out.
It's interesting, speaking about fear, because I don't have that fear, but the fear, maybe a month ago, I felt that fear. And you know what happened? I didn't sleep well for about 5 nights in a row. There's reasons for that, and some I can't fully explain, but for whatever reason, I had really bad sleep for like 5 nights in a row, and it prompted me to go and buy an Oura ring, which I've got on now, so I could see what was going on. And I've really enjoyed that. Actually, it's really been very helpful tracking my sleep. But I found that with a lack of sleep, that fear popped up, and it was completely irrational. And it just goes to show that, people often ask me like, Nick, what are some of the things you're doing, especially my podcast. I did an episode yesterday, which was a Q&A episode, and a lot of questions about health coming up. And I just said, look, stop chasing the shiny objects, the latest hack, the latest supplement, the latest technology. If you're not doing your sleep well, if you're not eating, going to bed early, if you're not eating early, if you're not having meals at the same time every day, roughly, not meditating, not getting time in nature, not walking 10,000 steps. If you're not doing these basics, clean water, clean diet, don't worry about the other stuff. Forget about it. It's a complete waste of time and money, because there is so much magic in doing the basics. Right?
We call them the foundations, right? It's people think of it as basics, and yes, but I almost feel like that word it's almost demeaning. Like people don't want to do it. It's just the basics, but the basics are everything. I mean, when I have a place in Maine, and I love Maine, but you see these old houses built on wood sills, and they're on salt marshes, and 30, 40 years goes by, those houses are crumbling down. Like, I mean, it is the truth of the foundation. You put it up on stilts, you put it up on a cement-based foundation, then you can actually make a house that matters. Like it's the ultimate. People ask me all the time, hey, what's the best supplement for this? And I say, I don't know, because I have no idea where you are right now. And if you're not getting all your activated Bs, if you're not getting 4,000 IUs of vitamin D, if you're not getting out in the sunlight, then honestly, 200 milligrams of ubiquinol from a time-release company doesn't matter at all. That's not going to repair your mitochondria, right? Diet, exercise, sleep, all that's going to repair your mitochondria. And then, yes, we can talk about nicotinamide riboside, transresveratrol, all those great things. And they are great, but they are the icing on the cake. That's the shutters on the house after you've already done all the foundational base work. So I'm glad to hear you brought that up, because when things aren't going well, that's always you go back to. You're not missing anything except the true foundations that you can build off of.
Yeah, and if I look at what was happening to recently experience the ME sort of symptoms, and I'm actually kind of grateful for those symptoms, because for me, it's now a really good early warning sign. And I hope I don't experience it too often, but I did experience it recently. And, I got on the call and I was like, Stephen, I've got that feeling, and you just reminded me of some of the basics. And I look back at the last few months, and I've had a lot happening, a lot going on. And I've got 6 singles coming out soon. I'm writing a book actually myself, which is a fiction novel, which is really a good challenge.
That's amazing. When people write fiction, I always wonder how they do that. I'm like, how do you come up with a story? Like I don't have that part to me. So it's always amazing. Like, So you're developing characters, and how do you know what words to write? I really believe it's a special skill. It really is.
Well, it is a special skill, and it's not something I've trained on. So I have brought in a writer and editor to help me make sure I'm nailing all those points, because I'm very excited about the storyline. It's loosely based. It's inspired by my relationship with Melissa, but it's fictional. It's kind of like a Star is Born mixed with Celestine Prophecy and 50 Shades of Grey. It's like, it's a lot of fun, but I had that. And Melissa had a book launch this week for her latest book called Purposeful, which came out as an Audible original series. And we're rebuilding her website, where there's actually a gazillion things happening right now. And it's, I found myself, I never usually work at night, but I had a few too many nights where I was working till not late, 7, 8 o'clock. Blue light, even though I'm wearing blue blockers, I'm doing all the right things, right? But I was doing that, I was training, and it just was just too much. And I'd stopped meditating as much as before. Hadn't been doing my Epsom salt baths. Some of these basics just go out the window, right? And that was enough to just take me back to a place of being reminded, Nick, just come back to the center, come back to balance. And it's not rocket science, to be honest. It's pretty simple to do.
No, and it's the benefit is that, again, you feel the symptoms because you're self-aware now, and that you can catch it before you go back there. A lot of people think that, there is kind of like magic, like they don't have to keep up with the things that got them there, right? And it's just, it's not the case. It's that all of our bodies, that's why the genetics do matter, because inside of our constitution, our dosha, our genetic code, however you want to look at it, our bodies will shift in a certain direction. So although you have a lot of strong pitta to you, there's no doubt that when you swing towards vata. And so since we know that it will be very predictable, all of the things that begin to fall and how they'll fall. And we also know that vata is typically in the head. They are about movement. They're about change. You have a lot of change. You love a lot of different things. And all of that keeps their vata, moving, and they love it. So they get caught up in it. And then if you have pitta, what happens, because I have quite a bit of that myself, my mindset is essentially 100% pitta, then you can take it too far. Because again, a little bit of a good thing is good. And when it becomes a lot of a bit of a little thing, then it becomes way too much. And your body just basically, it's like fanning a fire, and the fire gets out of control. Now, if you begin, and I talk about with you this all the time, is like, look at your life as a periodization model. We're going to have our sprints, but to get to our sprint, we're going to work up to it, and then we're going to have a period of recovery. And it has to be that way. And that's because if we play all out, which a lot of people love, good, then build in those times of recuperation. And that means a little bit extra sleep, a little bit more downtime, a little bit turning off the computer earlier, getting out, midday. Like when you were at your best, you were going out for a surf like at lunchtime or so. And then you'd come in, you'd have your food, your appetite would be there, and you'd do some work, and then you'd, have some downtime at night. And so what I believe is that everybody has a perfect schedule for them at that point in their life. And yes, I look at my life every 90 days, but I know what I can do and what I can't do. And it works well with my body, the timing, all of those specific things. And when I push too much outside of that schedule, well, then I'm going to start to get a little bit more run down. And I think that's part of the journey. And I don't think it ever stops. I really think that we are meant to learn, and we're meant to teach, just like you're passing it on to others through your podcast as well. Which is life, it's health, it's music. I mean, it's a polymath-based podcast. It's exactly, I think, so. what you hear is what you get. Share a little bit about that. I'd love you to kind of bring us full circle now about kind of some of those things that you do teach on your podcast and what you have like with the future for Nick Broadhurst. What does that look like? Because so much has happened. What's the next chapter?
Yeah, so the Nick Broadhurst show, it started because it actually started at the beginning of the period where I was coming out of, well, actually when I started working with you, roughly. And I had so much to say about my journey that I just wanted to start saying it somewhere, so I started the show. So it sort of started out as a diary. I was doing, similar to you, I was doing about 5 episodes a week initially. Now I just do 1 per fortnight because I actually go quite deep. But ultimately, I think there are so many things that you can do in life that can elevate you. And I've experimented with a lot of different things in my life. And there's been things that have worked, things that haven't. And it really just started out sharing that journey. Now I'm sort of diving into things that are very current. For example, when I restarted it, because I took some time out from the podcast, I restarted it and I did an episode called, I can't remember what it was called, but it was about coral and global warming. And what I tend to do now is find a parallel between something that's happening in the world and something that's happening internally with us. And you know, the beautiful story, the magical life of coral and coral bleaching that's happening around the world and what that can tell us about ourselves as well, how we're showing up in the world. I did one around the pandemic, which was focused on fear. And I'm trying to think of the most recent ones. I did one on breathing, for example, because I had no idea of the connection between the left and right nostril. I didn't know what they even did, what they controlled. And coming back to my sleep, I had a few nights where I had horrific dreams, like really, stress-inducing, cortisol-filled dreams where I woke up exhausted. And it happened a few nights in a row, and every single time my left nostril was blocked. I was thinking, what is that all about? So I started looking into it. And it led me down this really fascinating path. I read the book called Breath by, I can't think of his name, but an amazing book, yellow cover.
James Nestor.
Thank you. Yeah, fascinating book. And started looking at these things, and I started wearing the nasal strips at night. And it opened up this slightly impaired left nostril that I realized doesn't have as much flow as the right. All of a sudden, my sleep just changed with that one little thing. So instead of just sharing that little hack, I went deep into the science of breathing. So that's my podcast often has a parallel with something happening in my life, but I like to really go deep into topics. And I did one on fiber. I went all the way back to, Egyptian times, how the pharaohs used to have a physician who was called the shepherd of the poo, I think it was called, something like that. Really fun, interesting things to help people have enough of a reason to embed these teachings into their life. So I love doing it. This week was a Q&A because I do have a lot of questions come through DM, and I just thought I need to answer some of these questions properly now. But I really enjoyed just sharing the journey and hope that what you have learned can help someone in some way. And, I think it does. It's good fun.
Without a doubt. It's a great podcast. We'll be linking up all of your work today, but just before we wrap in a few minutes, I just want to make sure that people do know it's iamnickbroadhurst.com, and I believe it's that on most channels as well on social. Is that correct?
It is, yeah. Instagram is my main one. I am Nick Broadhurst. And
sorry, go ahead. And then I have a question for you that I want to understand this better with your music as we begin to pull things together. So, were you going to say something?
No, you go for it.
Well, I want to understand the music industry a little bit better right now. As an outsider, you're releasing a lot of singles, and typically, like someone might produce an album, and there's like one or two singles on it. Like 2 singles if you're lucky. They're great songs, but there's usually like one, and that's the single, and that kind of gets people to buy that album of like 10 songs, and you like 2 to 3, and the other 7 are okay. But you're doing something a little bit different. It's like every song is its own piece, like its own work. And I don't fully understand that because again, my expertise is it's only in one thing. So I don't know too much about music. So I would love to understand that. And then also how you decide to choose which songs to put to video. Is that more inspiration or how does that come about?
Yeah, I went through a period where every song had a music video, which was a lot. And I realized that wasn't sustainable. Probably energetically sustainable or financially sustainable. Because I am an independent artist and I have been with record labels. My first album, Thank You, was with a record label. And another single I did with a record label. But ultimately I just came back to the fact that, you know what, I know what I'm doing. I don't actually need that layer of support. I think record labels are very, very good if you're a very big artist and you need that level of support. And I think if I have a song that really breaks out in the sort of the hundreds of millions, that could potentially become then needed for me, because I just, as an independent, it'd be hard to manage the marketing and all the requirements of something like that. But right now, independent artists, there's some guys who are extremely big, who are still independent, and girls. It's possible now because there's different things set up to support that process. So now I think you'll see albums coming out. I know Sam Smith, he's got one coming out soon, an album. Taylor Swift just did an album. And I think it works really well for. No, they're with labels, and they're doing albums because for them, they have record deals, and it works for a record company to do an album more so than to do singles, because they can sort of build into this big event and push a lot of awareness and spend the money to this one big event of this album coming out. And it will generally, they'll hang their hat on a few songs off that album, right? It makes sense for the Taylor Swifts and Sam Smiths of the world, right? But for an independent artist, it's different now. It's totally different. And there's a lot to be said about consistency and just constantly doing the work and showing your work to the world. And I've become a lot better at actually not filtering my work so much. So I've gone through a patch where I haven't released a song since February, but I've got 6 that are about to come out, and they are going to come out every 4 to 6 weeks, which is unusual. But my next single is soul R&B. Never done that before. But this song came to me. I liked it, so I'm going to release it. Why not? Right? The song after that is a piano ballad. Then I've got this really smooth pop song. Then I've got like a Coldplay style song. Then more of a Radiohead song. Then a cover of one of my favorite songs. They're all so different. And why not? It's my career. They were all beautiful points of inspiration. Why not release it? What I don't have to tell this consistent narrative on Spotify to trigger the algorithm. I mean, you can if you want to. So the way that it works is a lot of artists who are, say, a folk singer and every song sounds kind of similar, really good for Spotify algorithms. Doing what I do, really stupid. Like, it just, it's not really the smartest thing to do. But I don't need to do music for money. I'm not doing it financially. I'm doing it because I love it. And I just want to release things, and I'll just see what takes off and what doesn't. It's going to be interesting. If one takes off, then I'll do a music video. That's sort of the process I'm following.
I see what you're saying. So it's based on how the audience reacts to that particular song and what the buy-in is for them kind of emotionally, and sharing it with friends as well.
Yeah, because I have no idea what people will think of Nick Broadhurst doing a soul R&B song. It's like, sure. But the funny thing is, if you go back to my roots, I was funk, soul, R&B. That's where I was, So it's kind of fun playing with that stuff. In fact, the chorus of my next single is all saxophone.
Going back to your roots.
Changing things up. Going back to my roots. Why not? So great. It's an amazing time to be an artist, and I know that a lot of artists are suffering who had a big touring income. But it's a great time to be alive as an artist because there's a very low barrier to entry, and anyone can be on Spotify. Doesn't mean it's going to take off, right? But anyone can be on Spotify. And I'm very lucky. I've got a great distributor with MGM. They're really supportive. And we're doing some cool things around TikTok and different campaigns. We're playing with ideas still.
That's great. I love to hear it. I love the creative side of you, and it emanates in all parts of your life. And it was great to be able to connect with you today. I will say for everyone out there, a family favorite in the Cabral household. I will come home, and this is actually a true story. I DM'd Nick with this and actually posted it to my Instagram stories. I believe the song is called Always You, or at least I call it Always You.
Yeah, it is.
And it's definitely on the playlist, and that's a family Cabral favorite right there. So, Nick, cool. Yeah, keep up the amazing work. It was great to have you on today. I love being able to hear your story. Love being able to hear it from a different vantage point than kind of I knew you from too. So you're doing amazing things, and like I said, keep it up. Looking forward to having you back on in the future as well.
It was great to be here. Thank you so much.
And before you go, let's share where people can find you. Once again, I am nickbroadhurst.com. I am Nick Broadhurst on Instagram as well. Anywhere else that they can find you?
Well, just Spotify, wherever you listen to music, whether it's iTunes, Spotify, you just search for my full name, Nick Broadhurst, and you'll find all my music.
Any one particular song you'd like people to search out or look for?
Well, I mean, you're clearly a fan of the music video, Little Lover, so definitely check out the music video on YouTube and the single. That's my biggest song, so there must be a reason for that. So definitely go and check that one out.
Excellent. Thanks again, Nick. Take care. Talk with you soon.
Thanks, Stephen. Cheers.
Are you ready to heal yourself and then go on to heal others? If so, the Integrative Health Practitioner Institute can help you discover proven functional medicine protocols that blend the best of 7 different healing disciplines from around the world. I personally share with you the exact handouts and protocols I use in my private practice that enable people to get well, lose the weight, and live longer, stronger. I want to pass this information on to the next generation of health coaches, and that is exactly why I created IHP. We are the future of the health coaching industry, and the skills and knowledge you will learn will make you an in-demand certified health coach anywhere in the world. Although we have many medical professionals taking the IHP certifications, no experience is necessary, and half our members have no previous health certifications. At the Integrative Health Practitioner Institute, our motto is a health coach in every home. Our goal is that you take this knowledge and then share it with family, friends, loved ones, your community, or in a practice where you create a career you love and can be proud of. The global IHP community is filled with some of the most kind and caring people in the world, and we can't wait to welcome you into our world soon. For more information or to set up a discovery call with one of our IHP Health Coach graduates, simply head over to integrativehealthpractitioner.org.